In the vast, swirling nebula of the Kepler system, a verdant planet named Erilus orbited peacefully. Here, Arya lived among her kind, a race of beings advanced in technology and bound by strict traditions. Arya's silvery hair and deep violet eyes were common among her people, but her mind brimmed with uncommon curiosity, especially about the mysterious blue planet known as Earth. Despite stern warnings from her elders, Arya's fascination grew. One forbidden evening, hidden in the depths of Erilus' Grand Library, she transmitted a sequence of encrypted messages, hoping to contact anyone, or anything, on Earth. Her actions, however, did not go unnoticed. The council summoned her the next day. The grand chamber, with walls lined with glowing crystals that pulsed with the heartbeat of Erilus, felt cold and intimidating. Arya stood alone before the council, her heart pounding. Erilisian law is clear, the head counselor's voice echoed, stern and unyielding. You have broken our most sacred rule. Arya, have you anything to say in your defense? Arya's voice was steady, though her insides quaked. My actions were driven by a desire for knowledge, not rebellion. I meant no harm, I only wished to understand more about Earth. Curiosity that endangers our secrecy is no small offense, another counselor chimed in, his tone icy. Your actions have consequences. The verdict was swift, exile to Earth. Arya's pleas met deaf ears, her fate was sealed. That night, as two guards escorted her to the launch bay, her mother, Mara, rushed to her side for a final embrace. Be brave, my child, Mara whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Remember, though far from Erilus, you are never truly alone. The journey through the rift in space was turbulent, a blur of lights and cosmic vibrations. Arya's pod hurtled toward Earth, crashing in a dense forest cloaked in the darkness of night. Dazed and injured, Arya stumbled out of the wreckage, her senses overwhelmed by the Earth's raw, unfiltered nature. Sounds of nocturnal creatures filled the air, and the soil beneath her feet felt alive. As she limped through the underbrush, a sharp pain shot through her leg. She fell to the ground, her breath shallow. Just then, a light pierced through the trees, and footsteps approached. A figure emerged from the shadows, a young man with curious eyes and cautious steps. Hey, are you okay? His voice was gentle, cutting through the silence of the night. Arya looked up, her heart racing. Was this a human? Was he like the beings she had read about? Her voice faltered as she spoke. I need help. The man knelt beside her, his expression softening. I'm Jacob. You're safe here. Can you walk? With his support, she rose to her feet, leaning on him heavily. Thank you, Jacob, she managed to say, her voice a whisper. Don't worry, Jacob reassured her as they slowly made their way through the forest. My cabin isn't far. We can get you cleaned up and figure out what to do next. As they walked, the initial shock of her crash landing began to ebb, replaced by a myriad of questions about her future on this strange new planet. Jacob seemed kind, but was Earth as dangerous as her leaders had warned? Would she ever see her home again? Reaching the cabin, Jacob opened the door, leading her inside. The warmth from a wood stove filled the room, a stark contrast to the chill of the night. This is it, Jacob said, motioning around the modest living space. Not much, but it's home. Arya sat down, taking in her surroundings, so different from the sterile beauty of Erilus. Books and gadgets lay scattered around, a testament to Jacob's life of solitude and perhaps, curiosity akin to her own. Earth is beautiful, she said quietly, gazing out the window at the shadowy forms of trees swaying in the wind. Jacob smiled, fetching a first aid kit. It's wild and untamed, but it's got its charms. Let's take care of those cuts. As he tended to her wounds, Arya felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, her exile wasn't a punishment but the beginning of a new, uncharted journey. Jacob's life had always been a tapestry woven with solitude. His cabin, nestled deep in the forest, was his sanctuary from the bustling noise of city life. Surrounded by dense woods and the melodies of wildlife, he found a peace that the human world seldom offered. That peace was abruptly shattered the night he found Arya. As Arya sat on the worn sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket, Jacob brewed some tea in the small, cluttered kitchen. The aroma of chamomile filled the air, a soothing scent that contrasted sharply with the chaos of the evening. "You're probably wondering where you are," Jacob started, handing her a mug of tea. His voice was calm, intended to comfort. "This is the Pacific Northwest, United States. It's remote, not many people around for miles." Arya took the mug, her fingers trembling slightly. "Thank you, Jacob. And yes, I am very far from home." She paused, her eyes meeting his. "I don't even know if I can ever go back." Jacob sat down across from her, curiosity lighting up his features. "If you don't mind me asking, where exactly is home? And how did you end up here?" Arya sipped her tea, the warmth welcome against the chill she felt inside. "I come from Erilus, a planet many light years away. My people are very secretive, and contact with other worlds, especially Earth, is forbidden. My curiosity about your planet, it led to my exile." Jacob leaned back, processing her words. "That's harsh, being punished just for being curious. But why Earth? Why send you here?" "It's considered a primitive and safe place to exile someone like me," she explained with a hint of irony. "Somewhere I could pose no threat to Erilus or its secrets." Jacob chuckled softly. "Primitive, huh? I guess we might seem that way to a civilization that can send people across the stars as a form of punishment." His expression then softened. "But you're safe here, Arya. As long as you need a place, my home is open to you." Arya looked around at the modest cabin, at Jacob's earnest face, and something within her relaxed slightly. "Thank you, Jacob. I may not have much choice, but I'm grateful." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of rustling outside. Jacob stood abruptly, a cautious look crossing his face. "Stay here. I'll check it out." Arya watched as he moved to the window, peering into the darkness. She felt a surge of panic. Could it be someone from Erilus? Had they come for her so soon? "It's just a raccoon," Jacob said, turning back to her with a smile. "No alien bounty hunters, I promise." Arya let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding and managed a small laugh. "I guess I have a lot to learn about Earth." "Yeah, and about raccoons," Jacob joked as he sat down again. "They're the real locals around here." As the night deepened, their conversation drifted from Earth's wildlife and nature to the stars that shone brightly through the cabin's small window. Jacob shared his passion for astronomy and his dreams of understanding the universe, which resonated with Arya's own suppressed desires. "I always wondered about the stars," Jacob confessed as he pointed to a bright cluster visible from the window. "Each one could be a sun to someone's home, couldn't it?" Arya nodded, her gaze following his finger. "Yes, and some are. Like mine." She paused, her mind racing with thoughts of home. "I used to study the stars too. I never thought I'd end up living under a completely different sky." "That must be tough," Jacob said, his voice full of empathy. "To give up everything you know." "I can't even imagine." "It is hard," Arya admitted, "but maybe it's also an opportunity. To learn, to grow, maybe even to find a way to forgive myself." Jacob looked at her, his eyes reflecting a mixture of admiration and pity. "From what you've told me, you don't need forgiveness, Arya. You're just curious, and that's never wrong." Their eyes locked, and in that moment, a silent understanding passed between them. They were both outcasts in their own way, seekers of knowledge and truth. "Maybe you can teach me about Erilus, and I can show you more about Earth," Jacob suggested, breaking the momentary silence. "I'd like that," Arya responded, her first genuine smile since her arrival spreading across her face. As they continued talking into the early hours of the morning, Arya felt an unexpected sense of belonging. Earth was not Erilus, but with Jacob, it felt like she might find a new place to call home. As the days turned into weeks, Arya found herself gradually adapting to the rhythms of Earth life under Jacob's guidance. Each morning, they would take walks in the forest surrounding the cabin, where Jacob taught her about the flora and fauna of the Pacific Northwest. Though initially bewildered by the diversity, Arya soon grew to appreciate the natural beauty that was so different from the engineered perfection of Aerolus. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, the room aglow with the crackling fire, Jacob handed Arya a book about constellations. "I thought you might like this," he said, a shy smile playing on his lips. Arya took the book, flipping through the pages filled with star maps and myths. "Thank you, Jacob. It's fascinating how humans have woven stories into the stars, just like the Aurelians." Jacob leaned back, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "What kind of stories did your people tell about the stars?" Arya's face lit up with enthusiasm as she began to share tales of Aerolus, of warriors and sages who traveled between worlds, their deeds written in the celestial tapestry. As she spoke, Jacob listened intently, his fascination with Arya's world growing. "It sounds like a beautiful place, with a rich culture," Jacob remarked, a hint of wistfulness in his voice. "But also very strict. Too strict for someone like you, who's driven by curiosity." Arya nodded, her expression turning somber. "Yes, it's beautiful and I miss it. But I always felt confined, restricted by rules that didn't allow questioning. Here, with you, I feel free to explore and ask questions. It's refreshing, even if it's also a bit scary." Jacob's gaze softened. "I'm glad you feel that way. You know, I've always felt out of step with the rest of the world myself. Too interested in things no one around here cares about." Arya looked at him, sensing his isolation. "Maybe that's why we understand each other. We're both outsiders in our own way." Jacob nodded, then hesitantly asked, "Do you think you could ever call Earth home, Arya? Or will it always just be an exile?" Arya considered this for a moment, her gaze drifting to the flames. "I don't know yet. Earth is growing on me, but it's not Aerolus. However, finding a friend like you makes it feel closer to a home." Their conversation drifted into the night, each sharing more about their hopes and fears. As the fire dwindled to embers, Jacob finally turned to a topic that had been on his mind since Arya's arrival. "Arya, you've told me a lot about Aerolus, but how exactly do your people handle contact with other planets? I mean, why is Earth seen as a threat?" Arya sighed, looking into the dying fire. "Aerolus once faced a terrible war with another advanced planet. It nearly destroyed us. Since then, our leaders enforced strict isolation to protect us from external threats. Earth, with its burgeoning technology and unpredictable nature, is seen as a potential risk." Jacob's brow furrowed. "But we're not all bad, you know. There's a lot of good here, too. Kindness, creativity, love." "I know," Arya said, meeting his eyes. "I've seen that in you. And that's why I was so curious about Earth in the first place. There's something about this planet, about its people, that's worth understanding." As the night turned into early morning, Jacob stood up, stretching. "It's getting late. We should get some rest." As they prepared to go to sleep, Arya felt a profound gratitude towards Jacob for not only providing her with shelter but also understanding her in ways that no one else had before. In this small, rustic cabin, with its earthy smells and creaking wood, she was millions of miles away from her home planet, yet she had found a connection that felt just as profound. "Yes, let's rest," she agreed, but as she headed to her room, she turned back and added, "Jacob, thank you for listening and for sharing your world with me." Jacob smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from him. "Thank you, Arya, for trusting me with your stories. Good night." "Good night, Jacob," Arya replied, her heart a little lighter. As she lay in bed, listening to the sounds of the forest and the distant call of an owl, Arya realized that while the future was uncertain, this moment, here on Earth, held its own kind of beauty and peace. She wasn't sure what tomorrow would bring, but she was ready to face it, especially with Jacob by her side. Several weeks had passed since Arya's arrival on Earth, and her comfort level with her new surroundings had grown exponentially, guided by Jacob's patient tutelage. They had established a routine, each day blending into the next with an ease that surprised Arya. However, the serenity of their simple life was about to be shattered. It was a crisp, clear morning when the change came. As Arya and Jacob were enjoying breakfast, the peaceful silence was broken by a strange buzzing sound emanating from Arya's discarded communicator, which she hadn't used since her arrival. It lay forgotten in a drawer, but now it flashed ominously. Jacob noticed the change in Arya's demeanor as she stiffened. "What is it?" he asked, concern furrowing his brow. "It's my communicator. It shouldn't be active unless," Arya paused, fear creeping into her voice, "unless someone from Airless is trying to contact me, or worse, locate me." Jacob was quick to react. "What do we need to do? Is there a way to block it?" Arya shook her head, her eyes wide with worry. "No, it's too late for that. If they've activated it, they know I'm here. We need to prepare for them to come." The next few hours were a flurry of activity. Jacob helped Arya gather supplies while she made modifications to some of the electronic devices around the cabin. She constructed a rudimentary alarm system out of spare parts and set up what defenses she could. As night fell, the tension in the air was palpable. Jacob and Arya sat back to back in the living room, each lost in their thoughts but ready to spring into action at any moment. Arya broke the silence, her voice a whisper in the dark. "Jacob, I never wanted to bring trouble here, to your door." Jacob turned to look at her, his expression resolute. "You didn't bring trouble, Arya. It found you. And I'm here to help, no matter what comes." Their conversation was interrupted by a sharp crackle from outside, followed by a low hum that grew louder. Suddenly, the night lit up as bright as day, and a small ship descended towards the clearing near the cabin. It was sleek and menacing, unlike any earthly design. "They're here," Arya said, her voice steady despite the fear. Jacob grabbed a flashlight and a baseball bat, primitive weapons, but all he had. "Stay behind me," he instructed, moving towards the door with determination. Arya followed, unwilling to let Jacob face the danger alone. They stepped outside just as three figures disembarked from the ship. The beings were tall and imposing, dressed in high-tech armor that glinted under the moonlight. One of them stepped forward, his voice booming through a translator. "Arya of Airless, you are commanded to return with us for judgment. Your exile was to be solitary, and yet you have entangled these primitive beings in your affairs." Arya stepped forward, her posture defiant. "I have done nothing but seek refuge. I will not go back with you." The Aurelian enforcer moved closer, his tone menacing. "You have no choice. You will return with us, or you will be neutralized here." Jacob interjected, his voice firm despite the obvious danger. "She's under my protection. She's done nothing wrong by your own laws, she was exiled, and she stayed away from your people." The enforcer sneered. "This human speaks out of turn. He will not be a factor." As the standoff intensified, Arya turned to Jacob, her resolve clear. "Jacob, get back inside. I can handle this." Refusing to leave her side, Jacob stood his ground. "We face this together, Arya." Seeing that the situation was at a stalemate, the lead enforcer raised his weapon, a device that seemed capable of immense destruction. "Last chance, Arya." Arya glanced at Jacob, her decision made in an instant. She stepped forward, her own device in hand, aimed not at the enforcers but at their ship. With a flick of her wrist, she activated it, sending a pulse of energy that disabled the ship's engines in a shower of sparks. The enforcers, taken by surprise, hesitated, which gave Arya and Jacob a moment to retreat into the cabin. Inside, Arya set up a force field at the entrance, a temporary measure, but one that would give them a moment to think. "Jacob, I can make a portal, but it will only hold for a few minutes. We can escape through it, but I don't know where it will take us," Arya explained hurriedly, her fingers flying over her device. Jacob nodded, understanding the gravity of the choice. "Anywhere is better than here, if it means we can be safe. Let's do it." As the force field began to flicker, signaling the enforcer's imminent entry, Arya activated the portal. Together, they stepped through just as the cabin door burst open, escaping into the unknown. The portal opened into a dense, misty forest, a world unknown and untamed. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and foliage, a stark contrast to the crispness of the Pacific Northwest. Jacob and Arya stumbled out, disoriented but unharmed. The portal flickered once more before closing behind them, cutting off any chance of the enforcers following immediately. "Where are we?" Jacob gasped, catching his breath. "I'm not sure," Arya replied, scanning the environment with a device pulled from her pocket. "But it's not Earth, and it's not airless. We're somewhere else, somewhere safe, for now." Jacob looked around, taking in the towering trees and the unfamiliar calls of alien wildlife. "Safe is good, but we're still on the run. Can they track us here?" Arya shook her head, her expression determined. "No, the jump scrambled any signal they could track. We should be off their grid for a while." As they ventured deeper into the forest, Arya explained more about the technology she used. "The portal isn't just random, it's designed to access safe havens, places I configured during my early experiments. I didn't know if they would ever be needed." Jacob listened intently, his admiration for Arya's foresight growing. Despite her exile, she had prepared for every contingency, including this most extreme scenario. They found a small clearing and decided to rest. As they sat, Jacob turned to Arya, his voice serious. "We can't run forever, Arya. What's our long-term plan?" Arya sighed, pulling her knees close. "I know. Running isn't a life. But first, we need to figure out where we are and if it's sustainable for us, or if there's another jump we need to make." As the hours passed, Arya's devices finally pinpointed their location, a remote planet known as Calypso in the navigational databases of Aerolus. It was uninhabited and known only to a few high-level scientists for its rich biodiversity and stable conditions. "Calypso," Jacob mused. "Sounds like a place from a pirate map. Do you think we could make a life here?" "Perhaps," Arya considered, her mind racing with possibilities. "If we can build a shelter and find a way to sustain ourselves, we might have a chance here." Determined, they set about making the clearing more habitable. Jacob's survival skills, honed during his years of living alone, complemented Arya's scientific knowledge. Together, they built a shelter and began to catalog the plant life for food and medicinal purposes. As they worked, the bond between them deepened, forged by necessity and a shared sense of exile. They were two souls from different worlds, finding solace and strength in each other's company. One evening, as they watched the twin suns of Calypso set, Arya broached the subject they had avoided. "Jacob, back on Earth, you said we face things together. Do you ever regret that decision? Following me into exile?" Jacob looked at her, his face lit by the fading light. "No, Arya. I don't regret it. These past weeks with you, I've never felt more alive, more purposeful. You're my friend, maybe more. I stand by my choices." Arya reached out, taking his hand. "And I am grateful for you, Jacob. For your bravery and your companionship." They fell silent, each contemplating their journey and the future. A few days later, as they had established a routine on Calypso, Arya made a decision. "I need to send a message to Aerolus," she announced one morning. "I need to tell them about us, about what humanity really is, and how we've survived. Maybe, just maybe, I can change their minds." Using her last bit of power from her devices, Arya crafted a detailed message, describing their ordeal, the beauty of Earth, the humanity Jacob had shown, and the potential for peaceful coexistence. She sent the message into the cosmos, not knowing if it would ever be received or believed, but hoping it might pave the way for a better future. "We've done what we can," she said to Jacob, who stood by her side. "Now, we make our home here, together." Jacob smiled, squeezing her hand. Together. As they returned to their daily tasks, building and exploring, a sense of peace settled over them. Calypso, with its strange beauty and alien skies, was no longer just a refuge, it was their new home, a place where two exiles had found a new beginning, guided by the stars and each other's strength.